You're not even ours. We picked you off the street. Amber's mother loved spitting those words at her every time she dared to ask for love. For years, Amber's entire life was a twisted puppet show, controlled by her toxic parents who fed her scraps of affection while reminding her she was disposable. But when Amber stumbled on an old yellowed file buried in a locked drawer, she uncovered a secret big enough to shatter their lives forever and to turn the game in her favor. A single signature changed everything, but not the way they planned. Have you ever been told, "You're nothing without us"? Amber's story proves how a single truth can flip that threat upside down. If you've ever felt trapped by toxic parents, hit like, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories of revenge. Amber Wilson was 9 when she first heard the phrase that would haunt her for years. "We didn't even want you. We did you a favor." Her mother, Patricia, usually muttered it after throwing a cold dinner on the table. Her father, Greg, never corrected her. In their house, Amber was the constant reminder of a sacrifice they claimed they'd made, a sacrifice they weaponized daily. Growing up under the roof of toxic parents means you don't just lose your childhood, you lose your sense of worth. Every birthday was a reminder that Amber should be grateful for being kept at all. Every holiday was a cold, tense performance. Her mother's favorite line, whispered with a smug smile, was, "We could have left you where you were." Amber never understood what "where" meant, just that it was used to keep her obedient. School was Amber's only escape, but even that was poisoned. Patricia would tell the neighbors, "She's not even ours by blood. We did a good deed." The gossip never stopped. Some teachers looked at Amber with pity, others with suspicion. It all blurred into the same message. She didn't belong. She was an outsider in her own home. By the time Amber turned 16, she'd learned to blend in and keep her head down. She took part-time jobs after school just to stay away from the house longer. The money? Her parents made her hand it over. They said she owed them rent for the roof over her head. She washed their laundry, cooked their meals, and when she dared to ask for college applications, Patricia scoffed, "Why waste money on a stray?" Amber's only light in that endless gray was her childhood best friend, Janelle. At 17, Janelle's family invited Amber to stay over on weekends. Janelle's mom would tuck Amber's hair behind her ear and whisper, "You deserve better, honey." Amber pretended she didn't hear. Hope was too dangerous when you lived with toxic parents who knew exactly how to crush it. On her 18th birthday, Patricia didn't even bother with a cake. Instead, she threw a thin envelope on the kitchen counter. "Happy birthday. Since you're grown up now, you can figure out your own mess." The envelope contained a single piece of paper, Amber's birth certificate, or so she thought. Curiosity, or maybe desperation, made her read it over and over. The names didn't match. The dates were off. Her last name had been crossed out in pencil and replaced with Wilson in shaky handwriting. Patricia's signature looked forced. Amber's heart pounded. For the first time, she questioned the lie that had shaped her entire life. Weeks passed. Amber waited until they were gone one night, off at a church charity dinner, ironically. She picked the lock to the old study Greg kept locked. She remembered him hiding envelopes there once, years ago. Behind a stack of unpaid bills, she found a folder marked State Reimbursement. Her fingers trembled as she flipped through pages stamped with official seals, proof that Greg and Patricia had filed for adoption support every single year since she was a baby. Thousands of dollars, lies wrapped in legal paper. They hadn't taken her in out of pity or charity. They'd taken her in for money, for a paycheck. Amber felt the last thread of loyalty snap. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table, the file spread out like a bomb waiting to go off. The next morning, she looked her mother straight in the eye and asked, "Do you still think you own me?" Patricia froze. Greg's face went pale when Amber laid out the documents in front of him. She saw fear flicker, and that fear planted a seed. For the first time, Amber realized she wasn't powerless. The thing they used to control her, her fake place in their home, was exactly what she could use to take her freedom back. She took a deep breath, folded the papers neatly, and slipped them back into the envelope. Amber wasn't going to run away. She wasn't going to beg. She wasn't going to fight for scraps anymore. She was going to make them pay. In the way it hurt them the most. Their precious reputation, their suburban respectability, their middle-class pride. All of it would crumble under the truth they'd buried for 18 years. Amber didn't slam the door or scream. She didn't need to. The folder was her weapon now, sharper than any insult Patricia could spit. She tucked it inside her bag and went to work at the local diner that day like nothing had happened. But every plate she carried, every coffee she poured, she pictured her toxic parents serving her instead. That night, she waited for them to corner her. Patricia didn't disappoint. She found Amber alone in the kitchen, washing dishes. "You went through our private things," her mother hissed, eyes darting toward the bag at Amber's feet. Amber didn't flinch. She kept scrubbing the greasy plate, the water scorching her skin. "I did," she said flatly. "I know exactly who I am now, and who you really are." Greg hovered in the doorway, pretending to be angry but looking like he'd seen a ghost. He tried to growl something, but his voice cracked. For once, the power shifted. Amber watched it happen in real time. Patricia's threats, Greg's silent glares, useless now. Patricia lunged for the bag. Amber stepped back, flicking the soapy sponge at her mother's pressed blouse. "Touch my stuff again," she said softly, "and I'll walk straight to the sheriff's office. Or maybe the local news? I bet they'd love a story about a good Christian family cashing adoption checks for 18 years. Patricia froze. Greg grabbed her arm. They retreated like cornered dogs. That night, no one knocked on Amber's door. The next morning, she ate her breakfast at the table, calmly, slowly, while Patricia hovered by the sink, pretending not to shake. The next week felt like an experiment. Amber didn't scream her secret to the world, yet. She wanted to see how far she could push them. She forgot to do the laundry. She left the dishes in the sink. She let her paycheck from the diner stay in her own bank account. Each tiny rebellion was met with Patricia's clenched jaw, Greg's muttered curses, but they didn't dare touch her. Then came the real breaking point. One Tuesday, Amber overheard Greg on the phone. He was in the study again, pacing, voice low but urgent. "No, she doesn't know the whole thing yet. I can make it disappear, just need the right contact." Amber pressed her ear closer. Disappear. That word stuck in her chest like a splinter. She remembered all the horror stories she'd read online, foster kids, adopted kids, runaways, who never came back. Maybe it was paranoia, but with toxic parents, paranoia keeps you alive. She waited until they were asleep. She opened Greg's old laptop in the study. The password was the same. Patricia 1223. Pathetic. She dug through emails, invoices, old letters from social workers. At the bottom of a folder marked taxes, she found a scanned letter from a state welfare officer. A warning from years ago. It spelled out the conditions of their adoption subsidy. If the child left home before 18, or if any fraud was uncovered, they'd owe it all back. Every cent. 18 years of fraud. Amber's heartbeat roared in her ears. She realized then, this wasn't just a threat to embarrass them. This was a rope around their necks. If the state knew they'd lied, they wouldn't just lose their reputation. They'd lose the house, maybe their freedom. Greg and Patricia had built their entire life on money meant for Amber's care, money she never saw. At dawn, she sat at the kitchen table again, folder in front of her. When Patricia stumbled in for her morning coffee, Amber spoke first. "Sit down." Her mother glared but obeyed. Greg joined a minute later, robe half open, reeking of stale whiskey. Amber pushed a piece of paper across the table, a single-page letter she'd typed at the library. "It's a confession," Amber said calmly. It says you admit to using the adoption support for personal gain, not for my welfare. It says you're willing to pay restitution if the state investigates. Greg paled. You're bluffing. Amber pulled out her phone. She'd already drafted the email to the state office, the local newspaper, and a popular community Facebook page. All she had to do was hit send. You think I won't? She said. Try me. Patricia's hands trembled as she picked up the pen. Greg's voice cracked. We can negotiate. Amber slammed her palm on the table. For the first time in her life, they flinched at her voice. I'm not here to negotiate. I'm done being the lost stray you could guilt trip. Here's what's going to happen. You sign this, or the world finds out. And that's just the beginning. Greg tried to bluster, to say he'd call the cops, but even he knew it wouldn't stick. Patricia signed. Her signature shook so badly it barely looked like her name. Amber gathered the papers, slipped them into a new envelope, and sealed it. She looked at her parents, her captors for 18 years, and realized they weren't monsters. They were cowards, small, petty people who'd stolen her childhood for gas money and cheap wine. She stood up. From now on, you do what I say, or everyone finds out. The neighbors, the church, your precious bridge club. You're done controlling me. Patricia opened her mouth, but no words came out. Amber walked upstairs, folder under her arm, heart pounding with something she'd never felt before. Control. That night, she lay awake in her tiny room. Her mind raced with possibilities. She wasn't free yet, not really. She'd just made her first move. But for the first time, the fear that had shaped her life was gone. She wasn't the unwanted girl anymore. She was the secret keeper, the blackmailer, the avenger. And her toxic parents were about to learn exactly what it felt like to be trapped. Amber's childhood room smelled like stale dreams and cheap detergent. But tonight, sitting cross-legged on her squeaky bed with papers spread out in front of her, it smelled like victory. Small, cautious victory, but enough to spark a plan big enough to choke her toxic parents on their own lies. She needed leverage, and she had it. But a threat is only power if you know how to swing it. Amber's first move was simple. Lock the confession and the state documents away, somewhere Patricia and Greg could never touch them again. So she bought a cheap metal safe with her diner paycheck and stashed it under a loose floorboard, the same spot where she used to hide her babysitting cash that Patricia always sniffed out. This time, no one would sniff out anything. Next, she made copies. 4 sets, one mailed to Janelle's house, one to a trusted teacher from high school who always told her, "If you ever need help, call me." She scanned the documents to a cloud drive, protected by a passcode only she knew. Amber wasn't taking chances. If her parents wanted to make her disappear, they'd disappear first. With the evidence locked tight, Amber turned to phase 2. Money. It was never about just surviving. She wanted them to feel the hunger they made her feel for years. Patricia's biggest pride was their neat little house. The same house they'd paid for, in part, with checks meant for Amber's care. It felt poetic that the walls themselves would become her ransom. She called them downstairs one Sunday morning. No church that day. Instead of folding her hands and praying, Amber sat at the head of the dining table, a mug of coffee steaming in front of her like she owned the place. Greg and Patricia sat opposite her, eyes darting to each other like guilty kids. "You're going to sign the house over to me," Amber said, her voice calm, almost bored. "Deed, mortgage, everything. I've got the paperwork ready," Patricia sputtered. "That's our home!" "No," Amber corrected, tapping the folder in front of her. "It's mine, or it will be. Consider it payback for the childhood you sold for beer money." Greg slammed his fist on the table. The sound used to make Amber flinch. Not anymore. She didn't even blink. "Try it," she said coolly. "Call your lawyer. Call your pastor. Call the state. Tell them why your adopted daughter suddenly wants her name on the deed. See what they say." Greg's shoulders sagged. Patricia opened her mouth but found nothing to say. In the end, they signed. Not because they believed Amber would really ruin them, but because deep down, they knew she already had the power to do it. By Monday, Amber held the keys to the only place they had ever pretended was theirs. The look on Patricia's face when the notary handed her the final form, priceless. But ownership wasn't enough. Amber needed to tie the noose tighter. So she dropped out of her diner job without telling them and applied for a small business license instead. Her plan wasn't just to make them pay once. It was to make them work for her for as long as they could breathe. She took out a low-interest loan, using the house, her house, as collateral. With Janelle's help, she leased a rundown office space in town. She didn't tell anyone her plan yet, but every brushstroke of fresh paint on those old walls was a promise to herself. She'd build something better than the life they stole. When Patricia asked why she was gone all day, Amber just smiled. "Working on my future," she'd say. Patricia hated that. She knew it meant she wasn't part of it. Every night, Amber laid in her bed, scribbling notes on cheap legal pads, budgets, ideas, contacts. She watched YouTube videos about small businesses and read late into the night while Greg and Patricia pretended to watch TV, their eyes darting at the stairs every time she walked past. They thought they could wait her out, that she'd get tired, slip up, give up. But Amber wasn't 16 anymore, crying behind a locked door while Patricia mocked her on the other side. She was the one knocking now, and every knock rattled their safe little cage. By the end of the month, her plan had teeth. She had the deed, the documents, the confession, the locked safe, the backups. And soon, she'd have the final piece, her toxic parents, reduced to the thing they feared most, servants to the very daughter they once called worthless. Amber didn't rush. Revenge that sticks is a slow burn, not a match that fizzles in the wind. She let Patricia and Greg believe they were safe in her house, their old routines still half intact. They left dirty dishes on the counter, dropped laundry in the hallway, and waited for her to pick it all up like before. Except this time, Amber didn't. Instead, she posted a notice on the fridge. "Household chores are your new rent. Non-compliance means eviction." Greg ripped it down the first night, so Amber tacked up 3 more copies. When Patricia threw them in the trash, Amber printed 10 more and taped one to their bedroom door. It wasn't just about petty chores. The real plan was waiting in her new office downtown. The space was a dump when she signed the lease, cracked tiles, flickering lights, but to Amber, it was her war room. She didn't tell her parents what it was for until the paint dried and the sign went up. Wilson Cleaning and Transport Services. One morning over stale toast, Amber slid 2 crisp uniforms across the table, her name stitched above the pocket, and 2 blank name tags waiting for theirs. Greg stared at the shirt like it might bite him. "What's this?" Amber sipped her coffee. "Your new job. Congratulations, you're both hired." Patricia's laugh was so brittle it cracked mid-breath. "You think we're going to clean houses? Drive vans? We're not—" Amber cut her off. "You're not what? Too good for honest work? Or just too ashamed someone might see you pushing a mop?" Greg's face turned purple. "You can't make us." Amber opened her bag, slowly pulled out her phone, and tapped the email draft. Subject line, "Adoption Fraud Report." She didn't say a word. She just held the screen in the air until Greg's shoulders slumped. They showed up at her office Monday morning. Greg in old work boots he hadn't worn since before Amber was born. Patricia in rubber gloves, her manicured nails hidden under cheap latex. Amber gave them clipboards and a list: houses to clean, small businesses that needed trash hauled, a couple of local restaurants needing supply runs. She made sure the schedule left them no time to gossip at church or play the respectable suburban couple. Instead, the neighbors saw Greg driving a beat-up van with Wilson Cleaning plastered on the side in bright blue letters. They saw Patricia hauling bags of trash to the curb outside local diners. It didn't take long for the whispers to spread. Amber didn't stop them. She fanned them. She offered discounted rates to clients in her neighborhood. She dropped business flyers at the grocery store where Patricia used to brag about her perfect family. By the second month, they were too exhausted to argue. Greg's back ached. Patricia's hands cracked from cleaning chemicals. When they begged Amber to hire someone else, she just smiled and reminded them, "I did hire someone, you." Sometimes Greg tried to fight back. He'd mutter threats. "One day you'll slip up, Amber. One day we'll take it all back." Amber didn't flinch. She'd lean in, lower her voice, and say, "And one day I'll press send. Try me." They learned quickly that Amber meant it. When Patricia once skipped a client's job and went to her bridge club instead, Amber texted her an image, the adoption fraud letter attached to an email draft. Patricia didn't miss another shift. People talk in small towns. Some pitied Amber's parents. Some snickered. But most people, the ones who'd seen Patricia's fake sweetness and Greg's smug nods for years, just nodded when they learned the truth. About time someone knocked them down a peg. Amber didn't care what anyone thought about her. She cared that her parents came home every night reeking of bleach and sweat, that they sat at her dinner table, eyes down, too tired to bark commands or spit poison. The power wasn't just in what she made them do, it was in what she made them become, servants to the very child they'd once used for a check. And every time she heard Patricia coughing up dust, or Greg muttering curses into a mop bucket, Amber's shoulders felt a little lighter. She'd built her own freedom, brick by brick, using their own secrets as cement. The girl who once scrubbed floors for scraps was now the boss. And her toxic parents? They were just her employees. Ever dreamed of flipping the script on your own toxic parents? Amber did more than dream. She made them mop the floors they once forced her to scrub. If you loved watching this twisted payback, hit like, share your thoughts below, and subscribe for more ruthless family revenge stories. The town could only whisper for so long. Amber knew it, and so did her toxic parents. The rumors about Patricia scrubbing diner toilets and Greg hauling garbage for pocket change were no longer rumors. They were gossip traded over fences and grocery aisles. At first, Patricia tried to save face. She'd paste on her fake smile for clients, telling them she was just helping our daughter's business get started. But when people caught her scrubbing old gum off a diner booth, the lie fell apart. Greg had it worse. The man who used to brag at poker night about running the household was now scraping sticky floors in fast food kitchens run by kids half his age. Amber watched the mask slip piece by piece. She didn't need to shout their secret. She just needed to open the cracks and let the truth leak out. Still, the final blow had to be precise. Quiet ruin was never enough for people like Patricia and Greg. They survived on image. So Amber planned a spectacle they couldn't hide behind closed doors. It started when she got invited to the neighborhood's annual fall festival, a boring potluck her parents used to drag her to so they could parade her around as their charity case. This year, the committee asked Amber to sponsor the cleanup crew with her new company. The irony made her laugh so hard she nearly cried. She said yes, of course. For weeks, she watched her parents drag themselves through long shifts, scrubbing floors by day, stuffing flyers for Amber's business into mailboxes by night. Every hour they worked was another hour their pride crumbled. 2 days before the festival, Patricia cracked. She stormed into Amber's room, wild-eyed, her hands raw and red from bleach. "You think you're so smart, don't you?" she spat. "This is our house. You think you can humiliate us like this forever?" Amber didn't even look up from her laptop. "It's my house," she said, calm as ever. "And this is just the beginning." Greg hovered behind Patricia, pale and silent like always. But this time, Amber saw something else in his eyes. Desperation that bordered on dangerous. "We'll tell people you're lying," Patricia hissed. "We'll tell them you forged everything, that you're crazy, unstable." Amber turned the laptop so they could see the email drafts, the same ones she'd shown them before. But now, she had a new one open too. A press release for the local paper, ready to publish with screenshots, scans, and a tidy timeline of how they'd stolen state money for 18 years. Greg flinched like the words punched him in the gut. "You do that," Amber said softly. "You tell them I'm crazy. I'll tell them how much you owe the state, how you used me as a paycheck. Let's see whose story they believe." Patricia's lips moved, but no words came out. Greg sank onto the edge of the bed, head in his hands. Amber felt no pity. She'd spent years begging these people to see her as more than a stray dog they'd leashed for money. Now she was the one holding the chain, and she didn't plan to let go. She looked at them, the two people who taught her how cruel family could be, and said, "You're both going to show up at that festival. You're going to wear your uniforms, pick up trash, scrub the bathrooms, and smile while you do it. And when people ask why, you'll tell them you're just giving back, just like you told everyone you gave me a home." Patricia's eyes glistened with tears she'd never waste on Amber as a child. Greg looked old for the first time in her life. And Amber? She felt nothing but calm. This was the moment she'd been building toward, the public stage, the final humiliation before the truth spilled out for good. The fall festival dawned bright and crisp, the kind of small-town Saturday where everyone showed up to gossip behind paper plates of potato salad. Kids ran through hay bales. Old neighbors caught up under plastic tents. And right at the entrance, wearing matching blue polos with Wilson Cleaning and Transport Services stitched over their chests, stood Patricia and Greg. Amber made sure they got the prime assignment, trash duty at the festival entrance. Everyone walking in saw them first, the same parents who used to brag about how much they'd sacrificed to raise a child no one else wanted. Amber stood a few feet away, clipboard in hand, greeting festival goers and handing out coupons for free cleaning estimates. Some people just took the flyers. Some raised an eyebrow at Greg, stooped over the garbage can, fishing out half-finished hot dogs. Patricia tried to keep her chin high, but every bag of trash she hauled left her face red and streaked with sweat. Word spread fast. People whispered to Amber when they thought her parents weren't listening. "Aren't those your folks? They working for you now?" Amber just smiled. "Family business," she'd say. "They owe me a lot." By noon, Patricia cracked again. She cornered Amber behind the food truck, her rubber gloves dripping with spilled soda. "You've made your point," she hissed. "Are you happy now? Everyone's laughing at us." Amber tilted her head. "Not everyone. Some people are just realizing the truth." Patricia's eyes darted around, voice lowering to a desperate hiss. "What truth? You think they care you were adopted? They'll never believe your lies about the money." Amber cut her off by pulling her phone from her pocket. With a tap, she opened her cloud folder. She turned the screen to her mother, showing rows of documents, scans, and payment statements. But that wasn't the final blow. "I emailed everything," Amber said, her voice calm over the muffled festival music, "to the local paper, to the state welfare office, to Pastor Evans, to Mrs. Dawson from your prayer circle. Remember her?" Patricia's face drained of color. She staggered back as if Amber had struck her. You wouldn't..." "Oh, I already did." Amber's tone was almost gentle, the same softness her mother used to fake in public. "You're not just the town joke now. You're frauds, and everyone's going to know." Greg appeared behind Patricia, a bag of trash swinging limply from his hand. He overheard enough to drop it in the grass. Bits of wrappers and half-eaten corn dogs scattered at his feet. "You ruined us," he whispered hoarsely. Amber stepped closer. "No, you ruined me for 18 years. I'm just returning the favor." People were starting to notice. Neighbors nearby paused mid-bite. A couple of volunteers turned to stare. Someone pulled out a phone, recording. Patricia's lips quivered, desperate to save face one last time. "We took you in when no one else wanted you," she shrieked, her voice slicing through the music and chatter. "You were nothing." Amber didn't flinch. She stepped up, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "And you cashed checks for me every year. You lied to the state. You used me for a paycheck." Gasps rippled through the small crowd gathering by the funnel cake stand. Greg reached for Amber's arm, but she pulled away. She didn't need to fight him. The truth was doing all the work for her. Patricia's eyes darted wildly, looking for an ally. But there were none. Not among the neighbors who'd once called her saintly, not among the church ladies who used to nod at her fake charity speeches. Amber turned to the onlookers. "They always said they saved me, but I saved myself." She didn't have to yell. She didn't have to shove them. The damage was done. The town that once pitied Amber now pitied the people who made her strong enough to ruin them. And as Patricia sank to her knees beside spilled garbage and Greg turned his back to hide his shame, Amber realized she wasn't the secret anymore. The secret was theirs, rotten and exposed under the bright festival sun, and there was no way to bury it again. After the festival fiasco, Amber didn't need to say much more. The town did the rest. The rumor mill turned into a truth machine overnight. The local paper ran a piece titled, "Adoption Fraud? Small Town Couple Under Investigation." It didn't take long for the state welfare office to open an inquiry, the same office that had sent checks to Greg and Patricia for 18 years without question. When the official letters started arriving, Amber watched Patricia pick them up from the mailbox with trembling hands. She didn't gloat. She didn't scream, "I told you so." She just stood at the window and let her mother feel every ounce of the dread she'd poured into Amber's childhood for so long. Greg tried to call old friends, but their phones went straight to voicemail. The bridge club politely disbanded. The church ladies found a new charity project, one that didn't reek of scandal. In the house they'd once ruled like prison guards, Amber walked the halls free. The final line was crossed when she handed them the official eviction notice. They could stay, but as tenants, paying rent to her, with every dollar documented. Or they could leave, crawl to a cheap motel, and let the neighbors watch them fade out for good. They chose to stay, but the power was gone. Patricia still tried to bark orders sometimes. Old habits die hard. But now Amber just raised an eyebrow and pointed to the signed confession tucked in her safe. The moment she did, Patricia's voice would shrink back to a whisper. Greg, once the cold enforcer in every silent dinner fight, avoided Amber's eyes completely now. He cleaned her car. He mowed her lawn. He picked up groceries with coupons she clipped for him like she used to clip discount pizza ads when she was a kid. Amber didn't revel in their misery every day. Some days she felt nothing. Some days she felt anger she didn't know what to do with. Anger that even her revenge couldn't erase the years they'd stolen. But most days, she just felt light, free, in control. She'd made her boundaries crystal clear. They were her tenants, her employees, and that was it. No more pretending. No more forced family dinners. No more guilt trips about being the child they rescued. The leash had snapped for good. When the state agents finally came knocking with more questions, Amber handed over every document, every letter, every email she'd saved. Patricia begged her to lie, to say she didn't know anything. Greg tried to promise he'd make it up to her. Amber didn't flinch. She let them stammer through their fake apologies, their desperate half-pleas for mercy. Then she turned away, letting the front door swing shut behind her. The consequences were theirs now. The shame was theirs. The life they built on secrets was collapsing, piece by rotten piece, and Amber didn't have to lift a finger. In the end, the girl they claimed they picked up off the street was the one who pushed them right out of the life they'd stolen from her. She didn't need their love anymore. She didn't need their approval. She'd carved her freedom out of every lie they'd ever told. And this time, the chains stayed broken. The house felt different once the threats and whispers faded. It wasn't just the silence. It was the way Amber could breathe in it now. No more waiting for a slammed door or a mocking laugh in the hallway. Her toxic parents still existed under her roof, but they were shadows now, drifting between chores, keeping their heads down. And Amber? She didn't waste her fresh freedom staring at old ghosts. The first thing she did was open the spare bedroom. It had always been Patricia's sewing room, more storage than sewing, stacked with dusty boxes and scraps of projects abandoned years ago. Amber emptied it out piece by piece. Old family albums went in a box on the curb. Torn fabric scraps followed. When the room was bare, she painted the walls a warm, pale yellow. It looked nothing like the dark corners she'd grown up hiding in. That spare room became her new office, her real one. No more working late at the diner or scribbling on the back of receipts. Now she sat at her own desk, planning the next step for Wilson Cleaning and Transport. But she didn't stop there. She applied for nonprofit paperwork too, something she'd dreamed about quietly for years, even when she thought no one would ever listen to her voice. Amber named it the Second Chance Center, a place for kids like her, teens who felt trapped in families that used them, manipulated them, silenced them. She wanted them to have somewhere to go when home was a weapon, not a shelter. Somewhere to learn how to fight back smart, to stand up and say enough. She would build it with every dollar she could squeeze out of the company her parents scrubbed toilets to keep alive. Some nights, she wondered if revenge really healed her. The truth was, not entirely. Nothing could give her back the stolen birthdays, the quiet cries behind locked doors, the fear she'd never belonged to anyone who wanted her for her. But every time Patricia passed her in the hallway and dropped her gaze to the floor, every time Greg scrubbed the kitchen she once cleaned alone at midnight, it was a reminder she wasn't that powerless girl anymore. Amber still had bad days. Sometimes she'd wake up half expecting Patricia's voice calling her worthless from downstairs. But now, instead of shrinking away, she'd remind herself, "They don't decide my worth anymore. I do." She found new friends too. Some were old classmates who messaged her after reading about her story. Others were strangers who thanked her for speaking out, for showing that secrets lose power once the light hits them. She started hosting small meetings at the local library, quiet circles where kids shared stories of their own toxic parents, cried when they needed to, and left feeling a little braver than when they walked in. The house that once felt like a prison was now just a building. 4 walls and a roof that couldn't hold her back anymore. Someday maybe she'd sell it, or tear it down and build something new in its place. For now, she liked knowing it was hers, not theirs. And every morning, when she unlocked her office door or met with a scared kid who needed someone to believe them, Amber felt it again. Freedom doesn't erase the scars, but it can turn them into armor. Her story wasn't about hate anymore. It was about proof. Proof that even a lie big enough to steal your childhood can't steal your future if you fight hard enough to rip it back.